Hello everyone and welcome to the Ticker.com's news channel on YouTube. On this channel, we review stock markets and discuss financial news, market trends, and economic data from Wall Street to Global Street. So let's get started. Global markets remained focused on corporate results as earnings season kicked in. Wall Street indices advanced after two inflation reports confirmed that the recent cooling trend is intact. U.S. consumer price inflation slowed to 2.4% in September, the sixth consecutive month of decline. Overall inflation dropped to the lowest level since February 2021. The decline in inflation largely reflected the weakness in energy prices, and energy costs fell at a faster pace of 6.8% compared to 4.0% in the previous month. Core inflation edged up to 3.3% in September, after staying at a three-year low of 3.2% in the previous two consecutive months. Despite the Fed's 11 rate hikes over 2022 and 2023, inflation has not dropped to the target rate of 2%, indicating rates are still not restrictive enough. Overall inflation has been moderating since June 2022, but that decline is largely reflecting the fall in energy prices, which are not impacted by the Fed's policy decisions. Producer price inflation was flat from the previous month following the increase of 0.2% in the previous month. On an annual basis, the measure of wholesale inflation slowed to 1.8% from an upwardly revised 1.9% in the previous month. However, the core rate of inflation, which excludes food and energy prices, accelerated to 2.8% from 2.7% in the previous month. Across the Atlantic, inflation in Norway picked up to 3%, and Germany confirmed disinflation slowed in September to 1.6%. The Reserve Bank of India held its interest rate steady for the 10th meeting and changed its stance to neutral, opening the door for rate cuts amid early signs of growth slowdown. Producer price inflation in Japan accelerated to 2.8% in September from 2.6% in August. The measure of wholesale price inflation was positive for the 43rd month in a row, due mainly to higher prices of basic items, including food staples and rice. Rising cost of transportation and fertilizers contributed to inflationary pressures. In other economic news, Germany's goods trade surplus expanded in August after exports unexpectedly rose. France's international goods trade deficit widened in August after exports rose at a softer pace than imports. China launched its $70 billion swap facility for brokerage firms and asset management companies to encourage additional stock purchases. Japan's current account surplus rose to a record high, and nominal wages advanced for the 32nd consecutive month. Let us review key events in global bond, currency, and commodity markets last week. The yield on the 10-year U.S. Treasury edged higher to 4.11%, after the latest price data confirmed that sticky inflation is likely to stay ahead of the Fed's target rate. Crude oil price surged 8% above $75.50 a barrel and extended gains for the second consecutive week on the supply disruption worries. Natural gas prices rebounded 5% to 40 euros per megawatt hour due to escalating worries about a widening war in the Middle East and growing risks disruptions. The euro edged lower to a two-month low of $1.09 amid rising expectations that the U.S. Federal Reserve will slow its future rate cuts following strong economic data. The yen weakened to 148.70 after the central bank officials reiterated that the central bank is looking to rates gradually. Let us review key events in global bond, currency, and commodity markets last week. The S&P 500 index and the Nasdaq Composite extended weekly gains to the fifth week in a row amid a positive economic outlook and a cooling inflation trend. European markets resumed their advance amid a positive earnings outlook and rising rate cut expectations. The Nikkei 225 stock average extended weekly gains to the fifth consecutive week after rate hike worries in the immediate future receded and the yen traded lower. Hong Kong indices plunged after a stimulus rally petered out after Chinese policymakers failed to announce additional fiscal measures, and investors shifted their attention to the finance minister's press briefing on Saturday. Indian market indices declined for the second week in a row, and the RBI held its repo rate steady as widely expected. Let us shift our attention to merger deals, market movers, and earnings update from leading companies last week. Bank of America was in focus after Warren Buffett-controlled Berkshire Hathaway continued to reduce its holding below 10%. JP Morgan Chase said net income declined after the New York-based bank increased its loan loss provisions. Wells Fargo reported better than expected quarterly results, but the net interest income dropped 11% from a year ago. BlackRock reported revenue rose 15%, earnings advanced 2% from a year ago, and net assets under management surged 15% to nearly $11.5 trillion, driven by a record inflow of $222 billion. Stellantis, the parent company of Chrysler, announced a management shakeup that will change the heads of Alfa Romeo, Jeep, and Maserati brands. Porsche said sports car deliveries in the first 9 months decreased to 226,000 from 242,000 a year ago. BP plc, the British Petroleum, the UK-based energy giant, confirmed in its trading statement that the weak refining margins and volatile trading are going to negatively impact its earnings. Tata Consultancy Services, or TCS, reported mixed quarterly results, and the company issued a cautionary outlook. Delta Airlines reported better than expected quarterly results, but the company's outlook dampened investor enthusiasm. Rio Tinto, the mining company, agreed to acquire Arcadium Lithium for $6.7 billion. Continental AG, the automotive parts maker, said third quarter profitability to improve despite the expected decline in sales. PepsiCo reported a slight decline in revenue and earnings and lowered its annual earnings outlook. Fast Retailing, the parent company of Uniqlo, based in Japan, reported better than expected earnings and estimated higher earnings in the current fiscal year. 7&I, the parent company of 7-Eleven, reported net income declined in the first half and announced a restructuring plan to thwart off its takeover by Canada-based Couche-Tard. In the week ahead, investors are looking forward to the release of retail sales and industrial output in the U.S. On the earnings front, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Blackstone, Citigroup, Bank of America, Charles Schwab, American Express, United Health, Netflix, Procter & Gamble, Abbott, Johnson & Johnson are scheduled to release their results. In Europe, investors are awaiting the release of current account balance, trade show balance, and industrial production in the euro area. The UK is expected to release its retail sales, inflation update, and employment data. In a busy week of releases, China is set to release its third quarter GDP, housing prices, industrial production, and retail sales data. Investors are looking forward to the release of September inflation data in India. You can review daily U.S. and global financial market news, stock movers, earnings releases, SEC filings, and economic updates on ticker.com and 123jump.com. You can find the latest financial books on redera.com, keep up with financial industry events on eventsinamerica.com, review ETF and mutual fund performance and in-depth profiles on tickerfunds.com, and review market updates and stock movers in India on niveshak.in. That is all for today, and we will see you